Welcome back to the Justice Factor as we continue our discussion about our 20 years of democracy. My guest is Dr. Frene Ginwala. Dr. Ginwala, let's talk about you referred to the service delivery protests. Now, isn't that when you see so many communities up in arms against their own leadership that they actively in the local elections, for example, chose, isn't that a rupture in the process that you're talking about? Aren't people saying to all of us that we're not happy with the way this is going?
Yes, they are saying that in many cases. They are also saying, because I visited some of the people, because they're sometimes destroying schools and libraries and things. And I asked them, I said, I understand what you're saying, but why do you destroy this? And they didn't put it in those words, but it was clearly anger and frustration, and they were just venting it on whatever they could see. To that extent, I think we do need to listen more to people. We need to be more careful about how people are, about delivery and how it's done, because it's still not perfect. It'll take a long time. For example, I remember in the first few years after when I became Speaker, on one occasion, Deputy President Mbeki at that time told us about what he said he was surprised. He walked into this municipal office and he saw a whole lot of files on the ground. And he asked the chap, he said, you know, how do you find anything? And he then discovered that they hadn't supplied him with filing cabinets. And I said then, partly laughing, I said, would he have known what a filing cabinet, how to organize it? Because we don't realize where we come from. Some of us are too privileged because we didn't have those problems. But we need to understand where people come from.
But aren't we, isn't that what one would call a cop-out? That we, instead of taking responsibility, we also, and you referred to this earlier, don't blame apartheid, but there are things that we are capable of. And one of them is that, okay, I don't have a filing cabinet, but I could file these things properly so that if consumer X comes to my office, I know that I'll find their electricity bill in file X.
But how many people had that experience? You see, what I believe we failed to do is to train people for local government. We trained MPs, massive programs, how to read a budget, all sorts of things. But we never put in place, and we still haven't, ordinary, simple training for local government officials.
Do you worry, therefore, that might lead to more service delivery protests, as they're called, to more disgruntlement? Are we in danger?
It could, if we don't listen more to people and try and address that problem. It's not too late. We've got better, for example, I know recently they've put in a new charter for public service in terms of how to deliver and so on. So we'll see how it works, but we've got to keep the pressure up there. I think perhaps the service delivery was a necessary process. I'm not saying it was necessary, but perhaps it has frightened people to say, and especially because they are destroying what they have. But hopefully we can overcome that, because I've already seen some changes in terms not so much of fundamental policies, but also of understanding how. I was one of the main spokespersons in exile for the ANC. But I was shocked when I came back home. I had never seen such conditions. And I used to travel. We lived in different African countries. So we didn't ourselves appreciate at that time how bad things were.
So when you look at today, and I want to refer to some of your former comrades who are today saying the African National Congress hasn't moved fast enough, far enough, and is losing its way in this struggle to transform South Africa, and hasn't really grappled with the issues of the very poor, of the poorest of the poor that you're talking about. And they're saying today, either vote no campaign, either vote for someone else, a smaller party, or spoil your vote. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Well, those are a very few handful of people who are saying that.
But significant voices, nonetheless.
That would be a matter of opinion. Let's see. You see, to tell people not to vote or to spoil ballots, what we fought for how many decades for the right to vote. I don't think that's an answer. And many of those people, not all, were in governments that made mistakes. Yes, we've made mistakes. I mean, it doesn't want to say we haven't. But you don't opt out. That's, for me, important. But I think it's been a wake-up call. At least some of us will try and make sure the ANC doesn't continue and does change some of those things and admits to certain mistakes. Those are things that have to be done, which they can only be done by dialogue, by challenging policies, by raising issues. Part of our problem is that and I speak again from a parliamentary experience, people did not discuss issues. They discussed who said it. If so-and-so said something, member of this party, don't pay attention.
And do you think we're listening to each other better now?
I hope so, because if we don't start listening more and debating the issues, not the people who are saying it, you see, if we don't do that, then it is going to be a very, very rude shock, not this election, but the one after that.
My last question to you is, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and try to project into 20 years, 30 years from now, given where we've been. Where do you see us in 20 years, in 30 years? I left my ball at home, but off the top of my head, I would say there were times when we never thought we'd reach this stage where we'd have the right to vote, that children would be able to go to school, that we changed the syllabus. So we have made some progress. And I believe after 100 years, the ANC has learnt, and it'll make that step. It still has the leadership. It has the capacity. The trouble is that we tend to focus on the bad things and not on the good things. For every school that was burnt down, how many were built? For every library that was attacked, how many were built? If we look at it that way, I honestly believe, and policies will change. Dr. Frene Ginwala, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Justice.
And with that, we come to the end of our show. Email us on justicefact@enca.com, tweet us on @JusticeMalala, and follow us on Facebook. Do join us next week for more news, views, and debates. My name is Justice Malala. Have a fantastic week.
News that moves. ENCA.com.